What's going on, Imperials? It's pretty easy to remember which types are super effective against one another in the games, as they're the keys to victory in battle. What can be harder to get a handle on is the type resistances. Just because one type is weak to another doesn't mean that they're resistant to it, and vice versa. I myself have been tripped up by many type resistances in the past, so here are my top 6 confusing type resistances. Number 6. Ghost is not super effective against fighting. Ghost is the only type with 2 immunities, being normal and fighting. This comes in very handy, and in turn the normal type is also immune to Ghost. So fighting would be immune too, right? No. Fighting gets the joy of being squarely hit with every Ghost move while being completely unable to fight back. So then Ghost is super effective against fighting? Well, still no. Every other type that has an immunity is super effective against that type, except for the double immunity situation that we just mentioned. So the fact that there's an immunity with no other special relation is just baffling to me. I've personally switched out Pokemon in anticipation of a super effective Ghost move, only to remember that it wouldn't have been that bad. It just makes the immunity seem so unfair when there isn't any reciprocal relationship to take advantage of, and simply nerfs the other type into oblivion. Number 5. Poison resists fighting. I always know that there's some kind of relationship between these two, but it's hard for me to keep it straight. After doing a quick mental check to make sure, nothing is super effective here, right? I then have to remember which one resists what. I think it's hard for me to remember because these two types generally have little to no interaction in the games, and really no correlation in real life. I guess it wouldn't do much if you punched an acid. In fact, it'd probably hurt you. I would see that as poison having the advantage over fighting, but it doesn't. This one has tripped me up in actual battle before, especially for people that may not be as overtly poison type, so I forget to take those matchups into account, because these two types are just so bewildering. Number 4. Rock and Electric's confusing relationship. Rock and Electric share no special relation to one another, both being neutrally effective, but playing through the first generation games, you wouldn't know that. You see, for whatever reason, there were no pure rock types in Kanto, with the majority of them being rock and ground types. This meant that they were completely immune to electric, which is the impression given through most of the game. The only other rock types are the fossils, which are rock and water, and rock and flying respectively. This means that all the fossils are weak to electric. So, all of the rock types were either completely immune to or weak against electric attacks. This was made even more confusing by Brock's Onix switching between the two due to sprinkler shenanigans. This has since been cleared up in later generations with the addition of pure rock types, but I knew many a kid on the schoolyard that would swear up and down on their misinformed views of the rock type. Number 3. Grass does not resist rock. It's assumed that if a type is super effective against another, then it would resist their attacks as well. At least, it's assumed by me. But that's not necessarily the case. For instance, I guess I had always just assumed that grass resisted rock, but it doesn't. Rock moves hit grass types just as hard as Ghost or Dragon or any other neutral type. I found this strange because rock is weak to grass, but somehow grass isn't strong against rock? Grass is already so disadvantaged on the defensive side, what would be the harm in letting it be a little more sturdy? But what grass does resist is electric. I guess the line of thinking there is that wood is a poor conductor of electricity, but there are surprisingly few grass Pokemon that resemble wood, most of them being just leaves or flowers of some kind. It's just always a rude awakening when you think your grass type can tank a hit, only to be nearly killed by a slightly faster rock. Number 2. Rock resists poison? I honestly don't know if I even knew this one before researching for this video. I knew that ground resisted poison because it's super effective against it, but rock has no special relationship with poison outside of this randomly assigned resistance. It feels like they saw rock as too weak and just spun a wheel to see who would end up resisting. Or maybe since the two types that it sits between, ground and steel, resist it and are immune to it, they thought rock should share in those similarities. I understand that if you throw acid at a boulder, it wouldn't do very much, but the same could be said of a fire, and those two are only neutrally effective against each other. It may be that I have never even seen this specific matchup before, since these two types don't typically have a lot of interaction. But it still seems like a completely arbitrary setup without much reason put behind it. Number 1. Ground does not resist fire. I don't know how many times I've made this mistake. I'll be fighting a fire Pokemon with my ground type and expect to resist the hit, and then I have it do way more damage than I thought. Or worse, switch in a ground type thinking that I'll tank the hit, only to have a huge chunk of my health gone. Ground is super effective against fire, so it would only make sense that it resists it. But, like grass against rock, common sense does not prevail. Cognitively, I know that ground type doesn't resist fire, but I guess since it's my favorite type, I just assume it can do anything, including hold up to a blazing inferno. From the high or the low ground, it doesn't matter. This mindset was clearly on display in my showdown video, where I made this very mistake, assuming a Landorus would resist my flamethrower and going for another move. I mean, I know that Scorched Earth is a battle strategy, but the Earth is still there afterwards. I'd say it takes it pretty well, but that's not the way it is, no matter how cool the ground type is. Every other relationship of receiving damage relative to the starter types are the same as the rock type, except for this one. Which I guess is why I always have trouble remembering that the ground type does not resist fire. So, there are some of the Pokemon type resistances I find to be most confusing. Which matchups do you have trouble with? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!